Hello class, hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to talk about the dreaded MLA format. MLA format is not my favorite thing to teach. It's a little bit tedious, although it gets easier as you learn it and you put it into practice. But nevertheless, we have to go over it because it is worth 20% of the essay grade. A lot of students produce very meaningful writing work, and they lose a lot of points because they just don't bother to look at the formatting. There are some great resources available to you on Blackboard. One of the things that is really awesome is the quick guide, which I will show you now. And the MLA quick guide is just a great way to access pretty much all of the information that you're going to need when formatting your essay. Now, I say pretty much because there are some things that are pretty obscure. MLA format actually has many layers, some of which can get sort of complicated. And depending on what you're trying to cite, if it's an obscure type of text or something weird, it may require you to go and look it up somewhere else. But most of your MLA issues are going to be knocked out with this little handy 3-page guide, which you can find on Blackboard. So what are the basics of MLA formatting? What sort of stuff should every essay have? The first thing is 1-inch margins. Now the margins are the little sections on the side of your paper. You can see the margins on this right here. They're about 1 inch. You want to make sure those are set to 1 inch because if they're too big or too small, I will notice, actually. I grade a lot of essays and I see a lot of essays over and over again. So when I see those margins are off whack, it jumps out. It sticks out like a sore thumb. The next thing is the font should be Times New Roman 12-point font. Now, I think most word processors default to a different font other than Times New Roman. So you will need to change that to Times New Roman. Make sure it is 12-point font. This goes for everything. The title of the essay, the works cited stuff, all of that stuff is going to be 12-point font. Nothing is large, nothing is made bold or anything like that, the title or anything. You want to make sure it is left aligned. And what left aligned means is that basically the lines all back up to the left side of the page. You can do left aligned, centered, or right aligned. A lot of students will do centered because it looks nice to put everything in a centered manner on the essay. But actually, you want to make sure that it is left aligned. You also want to include a header. This is at the top right-hand page, right-hand corner of every page, and it includes your last name and the page numbers. So in my case, this would be Murphy 1, Murphy 2, Murphy 3. You don't need to have Murphy page 1. You just say your last name and then the number corresponding to that page. Begins on page 1, goes through page 3. There's a way to do that very easily with a word processor. You simply go insert page number, top right-hand corner, place it all the way to the right, and then go in and type your name in front of it and adjust the size and font. The headings, that's the next thing here, the headings. Heading and header, that can get kind of confusing. Header is last name and page number, goes to the top right-hand corner. The heading is only on the first page, goes on the left-hand side of the page, and includes the following information: the student's first and last name, the professor's name, that would be my name in this case, which is Brian, spelled with a Y, the course and section number, so that's going to be, in our case, English 1101, and the date. Now notice the date is European style, which means that the day comes before the month and the year. Okay, so this next part, sorry, I'll make that a little larger for you. The next part is regarding in-text citations. Now, the first essay that we do does not require secondary sources. It leaves them optional, and I would caution against doing secondary sources in the first essay, as I did previously, just because you don't know how to do it yet. You don't know what sources are credible, and it can be an issue when you try to attempt that essay without this information. However, if you're feeling confident, or if you're ready to attempt the second essay, or whatever it is you're doing, then you can refer to this little portion on in-text citations. In MLA, all references to primary and secondary sources, including quotes and paraphrased passages, require in-text citations, also known as parenthetical citations. This method involves placing relevant source information, usually the author's last name and page number from the source, in parentheses after a quote or paraphrase. Any source information that you provide for in-text citations must correspond to the source information on the works cited page, which goes at the end. More specifically, whatever signal word or phrase you provide to your readers in the text must be the first thing that appears on the left-hand margin of the corresponding entry in the works cited list, which is usually the author's name, the author's last name. Now, there are some instances where you won't have an author's name, and the source will be still be credible. For example, NASA.com. We all know NASA's credible. They're a space organization. So the author's last name in this case isn't going to be available a lot of the times, because sometimes people write for NASA and they don't list their name on whatever's being written, like on the home page or whatever. It doesn't say this was written by Bobby the intern on November the 4th. So in the event that you have a credible source but you don't have the author's name, the information that you provide in the citation might change. It will be whatever is first on the works cited page. So in the case of not having the author's last name, you simply omit it, and then whatever comes first, which is usually the title of the work itself, that will be what goes in the parentheses. The author's name may appear either in the sentence itself or in the parentheses following the quotation or paraphrase, but the page number should always appear in parentheses, not in the text of your sentence. For example, okay, so these are examples of using in-text citations. Wordsworth stated that romantic poetry was marked by a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. And then we have the parentheses 263. Now that parentheses 263 is the page number. So I know if I go to that source, which I know is by Wordsworth because you stated his name in the sentence, then I go to the works cited page, I find the source from Wordsworth, I go and procure the source from the library or the internet or wherever, I open it up to page 263, and lo and behold, that quote better be there. So that's how we do it. Now, the only reason I did not include the author's last name in the parentheses on the first one is because I said it in the sentence, Wordsworth. We know that's who it was. Now, if I didn't say his name, as is the case with the second bullet point here, I would simply put his last name in the parentheses so I know how to find it on the works cited page. Romantic poetry is characterized by the, quote, spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, close quote, parentheses, Wordsworth 263, parentheses, period. Okay, so one thing you want to notice is that the period for the sentence, the punctuation for the sentence isn't in the quote, right? Now, you might expect it, depending on what it is you're quoting, you might expect to put a period in the sentence before the close quote, but no, that is not so. Actually, the period for the whole sentence goes after the parentheses. This is a common mistake people make. They put two periods, either one right here and one right here, or they put one right here and they don't put one after the parentheses. There's only one period. It goes after the parentheses. Okay. The final example here is an example of paraphrasing. So paraphrasing is where you change the words for the purpose of summary, but a lot of the times paraphrasing can be dangerous because it changes what was said on the page. And you'll notice this paraphrasing isn't a perfect expression of what we said in the previous two. Wordsworth extensively explored the role of emotion in the creative process. Parentheses 263. Now that is a paraphrasing of what we said earlier about the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, which is what he actually said verbatim, but we have paraphrased it here, but even though we have paraphrased it, we have to include the citation because it came from somewhere else. So we have to know. If I want to know what exactly it is that he said about the role of emotion in the creative process, I will go to page 263 of the source by Wordsworth. Okay, moving on to the next thing. I told you it was tedious, folks. So yeah, it says both citations in the examples above, 263 and Wordsworth 263, tell the readers that the information in the sentence can be located on page 263 of a work by an author named Wordsworth. If readers want more information about this source, they can turn to the works cited page where, under the name of Wordsworth, they would find the full citation of the text which contained the quotation. This is true. Okay, now the next thing is a block quotation. And I do want to mention a block quotation because I have a little bit of a house rule. It's kind of an unspoken rule, but it's a rule that I have nonetheless, and that is you're pretty much only allowed one block quotation per 3-page essay. A block quotation is where you quote something, and the quote that you use goes over 4 full lines of text. Over 4 full lines, not 3 3/4, over 4 full lines. If you have a quote that long, which sometimes you do need a quote that long, there are instances, in a 3-page essay, a quote that long is going to eat up a big chunk of the word count. So if you do more than one, it's a good chance that a lot of the stuff that you have in your essay is actually going to be from someone else, and there isn't that much of your own writing present on the page. So I try to keep it at one per essay, and that's pushing it. You really want to try to use shorter quotes, because really what matters in these essays is that I hear from you. You're, of course, going to be using secondary materials depending on the circumstance, but you want to use those in a way that incorporates your own voice, as opposed to having the quotes themselves dominate huge portions of the essay. Nevertheless, if you have a block quote, you have to understand that if it goes over 4 full lines of text, you need to format it in a special way. The block quote for prose, now that's if you're working with prose, and you may go on to 1102 and be working with literature, in which case you might use poetry, so that's why there's a distinction here. But for prose, if a quotation runs longer than 4 lines into the text, set it off from the text by beginning a new line, indenting 1 inch from the left margin and typing it double-spaced without adding quotation marks. The parenthetical reference for a block quotation sits at the very end in parentheses after the closing punctuation. Okay, so you basically indent everything, every line, including, usually you indent the first line of a paragraph, but in a block quotation, you indent every line of the quote. You do not include quotation marks, and you put the parentheses at the end with the citation information inside. For poetry, if a quotation runs longer than 3 lines into the text, set it off from the text in the same way as a prose quotation. Okay. Hopefully that won't be an issue for you until you're in 1102. So here is the works cited page. This is the general information that you are going to be looking for when you gather your citation information. What is citation information? You may have noticed, if you have books that you like to read often, that little page in the front with all that writing on there, and it's just a bunch of legalese and numbers, and you don't really understand it. Well, that's the publication information. And the publication information can tell us when a source was printed, how long ago, by who, you know, are there multiple editions, all kinds of things. So when you're providing the information for the works cited page, you're going to be looking for the publication information. Sometimes, if you're using a database such as Galileo, the publication information will be provided for you. They will actually give you the citation, and you can export it for your own use. Sometimes you will have to construct the citation manually, in which case you'll have to go down this list and find all of the information that you can. Generally speaking, if you can't find something, you just omit it. Okay, so some of these things, like, for example, if the title of container, well, what if your work doesn't come from another source? Like, what if it's not an article in a journal? Then it has no container, so you would just omit it. So here's the list, and it's generally in this order. So you go through this list and you try to find all of the information that you can that corresponds with the source. Now, one important thing to note, this is the case, this will take care of most sources, books, scholarly journals, websites, that kind of thing. However, well, I say websites, actually, yeah, it'll take care of websites. I think you just include the URL somewhere if you want to do that. But in any case, it will take care of most sources, but there are some sources which it won't take care of. That's basically what I'm trying to get to. So like, for example, if you were citing a YouTube video, or if you were quoting a movie, like a film, or if you can quote tweets and things now in the new edition. If you were doing something weird like that, you would probably have to look up different information. So I have some stuff I'm going to show you at the end of the video, where if you have to do the deep diving on a special type of source, there are great free resources available for you online, so that's not such a tedious thing. But generally speaking, you go through and you find first the author's name, last name first, then the title of the source, that's usually primarily displayed. The entry of the title should be a full representation of the piece. A colon should separate the primary title from the secondary title, if that is how it is formatted. The source should be in quotation marks if it is part of a larger work. The source should be in italics if it is self-contained and independent, such as a book. The container represents the larger, that's the next one, number 3, the container. The container represents the larger whole of the source. The entry of the container is normally italicized and should be followed by a comma, since the information that comes next describes the container, e.g. book, collection title, periodical, television series, website, comic book series, etc. Okay, Other contributors. Are there other people involved in the creation of the source? Was there a translator? Was there someone that collaborated with photographs or something? If their participation is important to the research conducted or to identifying the source, name the other contributors in the entry. Precede each name with a description of the role, e.g. adapted by, directed by, edited by, translated by, etc. Okay. That is a little bit more rare. Sometimes you do have like, oh, this was translated by a specific person, and maybe that is instrumental to finding the specific work that you used. So you may have to include that. Next, number 5 comes the version. If the source indicates that it is a version of the work, identify the version in the entry. Books are commonly identified as editions instead of versions. Number, if the source is part of a numbered sequence, include the sequence number in the entry, e.g. volume number, number 1, season 1, episode 1, etc. The publisher, that would be the organization primarily responsible for producing or making the source available to the public. So Penguin Books, the Harvard University Press, there's all kinds of different publishers. Their name will be included in the publication information. And the publication date, when was this done? A lot of times this is really important because when we work with sources, we want them to be fairly recent. The older we go, sometimes the stuff has changed and the older sources don't work as well. So that's important to note. Okay, and then the final thing is the location. Where was it published? So here's an example of like works cited formatting that you might run into. This is for a book, last name, first of author, book title, publisher, year, pretty simple. This is for a film or television. If you're using film, maybe in your 1102 class. A journal, lots of journal stuff is going to come up, so this is a good one. Last name, first of author, article title, journal title, volume number, volume, number, publication, year, and then this is the page range, PP, number dash number, that's the page range. So when you're working with a journal, it'll be an article in a journal, so there's going to be other articles in that journal. So the page range is like, where does your article start and end? So like it starts on page 27 and it ends on page 43. So you would put PP period 27 through 43 period, and then that's how you would handle that. And that lets me know the page range. If I have the actual hard copy of the journal in my hands, I can go and look it up that way. Or work in an anthology, last name, first of author, chapter title, collection title, edited by, publisher year, etc. Now it says please consult the manual here because there are some weird things out there. Each time you have a different type of source, you're going to want to look up how to cite it specifically. Even though most of it goes on the same general information, there are some variations depending on the type of source, and some of it can get really obscure, and it will require you to do some deep diving in the manual. So for the purpose of giving you a free resource, so you don't actually have to buy, back in my day, we had to buy the MLA manual, but you don't really have to do that anymore. So what I want to share with you now is a cool website. There we go. There's a cool website here called the Purdue Owl. Now, if you type in Purdue as in Purdue University, and then Owl as in owl, that stands for Online Writing Lab. And if you type it in and you click on it, it's going to take you to this page. Make sure you click on the one here on the right that says Owl. Don't click on this because this is the actual on-campus writing lab, and none of us go to Purdue. So clicking on the Owl is really cool for a number of different reasons. One of the reasons it's so cool is that it is pretty much a free resource for all kinds of writing problems. There's general writing stuff, there's stuff about research, there's also things you can practice over grammar and stuff that you struggle with. It's a very, very useful resource for all of your college classes that involve writing. One of the other cool things about it is that it has style guides, formatting style guides, not only for MLA, which is what we use in English classes, but also for APA and Chicago style, which are two other formatting styles that you may run into depending on the discipline of your class. So, your history teacher is going to use a different style than your psychology teacher, than your English teacher is going to use. I understand that may be frustrating to a lot of you to learn all of these different styles and commit them to memory. And it's true, I can understand why you would be frustrated by that. Why don't they all just use the same one? But there are subtle differences in preference that make one of these preferable over the other. And so since you do have to learn several of them, it's great to have this free resource available so that you can use these free guides to format your essay and you don't have to do a whole lot of digging. If you click on the MLA Style Guide, there's all kinds of stuff over here. So one of the big things, you take this pull-out tab, boom, and it has all of this stuff about formatting and works cited and how to do different things. It's also got a sample works cited page, which you can click on and see. One of the cool things about the works cited page that I forgot to tell you about is that after the first line of each citation, you indent the second and third lines. So you see here, and then that way you don't have to put any extra spaces in between the sources. There are no extra spaces between paragraphs, between the title and the paragraph, between the title of the works cited page and the citations, or the citations themselves. Every time a new source begins, it will be left aligned, and the previous line of the previous source will always be indented. This lets me know when one source ends and another begins, so you don't have to put these extra spaces. Please don't put extra spaces in your essay at all, because those extra spaces will constitute a formatting deduction. Notice that all of the sources are in alphabetical order and that they are listed with the second and third lines indented, and it just goes all the way down. Sometimes you can have a lot of sources. This person used a lot. Sometimes you only have a few. But that's a sample works cited. Now, the only thing I notice is that this clearly isn't Times New Roman, so make sure that yours is. But that's one thing that you can look at. You can also look at a sample paper. However, the one thing I will say about the sample paper, even though it is very helpful to look at, is that if you notice here on page 2 of the sample paper, there's a title for this particular paragraph. I don't want paragraph titles or anything like that. So please omit the paragraph titles. If you get tempted, know that they're not needed. But here's an example of a block quote, right? You see how every line of it is indented. So it can be useful to check and just like visually compare. Of course, all of these blue and green boxes are just telling you things about the style and how to format it and stuff. But it can be very helpful for you if you're a visual person and you need a visual comparison. And again, there's all kinds of sources here. If you want to know how to do different types of sources, electronic sources like websites and stuff, other common sources, additional resources, there are tons of things here for your perusal, and it's actually fairly intuitive how they have it laid out. So please, if you ever have to do any deep diving, or you want to just double check and make sure your MLA is good, come to this website, the Purdue Owl, great free resource that we have available. And it can be your lifesaver depending on your situation. Okay, sorry, I've caused us to go into the void here. There we go. That'll do it. Make all this strange stuff go away. Okay. So anyway, that is MLA, and I hope that it was fairly easy. Again, you have this quick guide available to you on Blackboard. You also have the Purdue Owl at your disposal. Remember to take your time and make sure your formatting is correct, because it is 20 points of the essay grade. And I can't tell you how many frustrated students I've had. Well, why did I get a C on this essay? I thought I wrote it so well. It's true, you did write it well, but unfortunately, you didn't pay attention to formatting. So that's all I have for this video. I hope that you guys have an excellent day, and please let me know if you have any questions at all.